This is Lightning Power Lunch with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli on Lightning Radio.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll go over some video. Like I said, just details slipped there in that third. But, you got to give them credit. They didn't quit. They kept playing, throughout the whole game. And we just got to be a little bit better and a little bit more focused kind of in that third there of just kind of playing the same way.
We know that they're battling for a playoff spot, and they're a team that's not going to quit. They're a really hard-working team, so we knew that. I think maybe a little bit in the decision-making, trying to look for more offense sometimes rather than just making the smart play. And, definitely going into the next game against these guys, that's how we're going to have to play.
Anthony Cirelli, Braden Points, for those of you who are listening and you can't see the visual. Boy, Anthony Cirelli, partner, looks like he's been boxing it out for 12 rounds. He is beat up pretty good.
That was like that he took a stick from Hannafin in the game in Vegas. Accidental stick.
He looks like he's been through it, and those battle scars as the regular season comes closing. Lightning and Islanders, this will be an interesting game, more so for the Islanders, but I think the Lightning, you and I have been talking about this, there's a real opportunity here to take the division, and I think they're going to continue to do that. Steve texted us, our producer, before we came on, partner, that the Lightning can clinch a playoff spot with a win and both Montreal and Columbus losing in regulation. So that's kind of a cool thing to see how it all transpires today. I mean, it feels pretty early, but I guess, look, you're that 10-game mark remaining in the regular season, maybe not, but I don't know. I always feel like sometimes these things come down to the end for a lot of teams looking to clinch, and, the Lightning have an opportunity here to do that tonight with some luck.
It's nice to get the X next to your name in the standings. It's going to happen. I mean, it may not happen tonight. It's going to happen fairly soon. And we've had seasons where the Lightning, they haven't even been in the wild card, but it's gone down to maybe the last 4 to 5 games before they get that X. So I think the players will be glad to have clinched when it does happen. And then the attention, obviously, will be on where they are going to finish.
Right.
And I think I mentioned, Greg, I had a conversation with Victor Hedman during the homestand about his feelings on this whole question of finishing first. And he actually drew a distinction between more so getting home ice and not getting home ice and less about finishing first. So in his mind, it's like almost getting second is more significant than kind of emptying the tank to try and finish first. Not that they're going to empty. They're going to play the way they want to play, right? But that was interesting because it really was less about maybe avoiding a matchup and more about starting at home and getting the extra game at home, because we can see the Lightning have been a much better home team during the regular season record-wise than they've been on the road. They're a game under Hockey 500 on the road. So we'll see how it plays out. They are – it's hard to say they're in the driver's seat, but, ultimately, if they win out, if they win all the remaining games – they're not going to finish third. We know that. If they win all their remaining games, they will probably finish first, because that means they will have recorded wins over Toronto and Florida. But there's still a long way to go. They could finish anywhere from first to third, and they could still finish fourth. Ottawa could conceivably catch the Lightning if the Lightning go into a tailspin and Ottawa goes on a run, and there's the one head-to-head between the teams coming up on Thursday in Ottawa. So, look, clinching a playoff spot would be nice. I don't think that there's major drama this year based on the work the Lightning have done really since the beginning of February. But they are facing a team tonight, as we mentioned. You heard Braden Point talk about this. That will be playing with the same level of desperation, if not more, than what the Lightning saw on Saturday. So hopefully they'll be a little bit better equipped to handle what the Islanders throw at them. The Islanders played a good game with the puck on Saturday and were foiled by Johansson. And then they went to Carolina. It's not an easy back-to-back. It's not going from, Florida to Washington. So it's easier than that. But they were going into Carolina's barn. Carolina has been playing really well, and Carolina dropped a 6th spot on the Islanders. So that's not going to sit well with New York, and they're going to have to figure out a way to turn the ship around quickly.
Well, he's depending on what you feel they needed to finish closing out the season to get into the playoffs. I mean, this is a game they need.
Yeah, they're 3 points back.
Yeah, they're struggling
And
a bit.
they're going to need to. I mean, going on any kind of a losing streak at this point of the season when you are battling for a final playoff spot is far from ideal, and it's hit them at a terrible time. They are 0-3-2 in their last 5.
Yeah.
So Chris King, their longtime radio announcer, is going to be joining us in about 10 minutes or so, and he can talk to us a little bit about the Islanders. Like, they're a funny team, Greg, because we've talked about the Lightning's metrics being really impressive across the board, and they have been this year. You look at the Lightning's metrics, and you come away from those metrics saying they should be a playoff team, and they're going to be a playoff team. You might even make the argument that they should have more points than they actually do based on where they are in all of these significant league rankings.
It's fair.
The Islanders are a bottom half team in all of those same categories, with one exception, their 5-on-5 ratio. They were above water, 5-on-5, but it's not like they're a top 5 team. I mean, offensively, I think they're 19th. Defensively, they're in the 20s. So you might say, all right, well, how are they doing it? And I don't really know. I don't know how they're doing it because their special teams are even worse. They've popped in a couple of power play goals in the last couple of games, including one against the Lightning, but that got them just to 31st in the NHL, and their penalty kill's 30th. They've done a good job of staying out of the box, which has helped them. Sorokin's got good numbers, but he's not got, he's not going to be in the conversation for the Vezina this year. So how are they in a playoff spot contention? Really? So I'm hoping, I don't mean that with any disrespect. I'm just looking at their numbers and they're not really gifted offensively, and they've been missing Barzal, their best offensive player, since the teams met the first time. That was his last game, the beginning of February. Defensively, they're a bottom 3rd team. Their special teams are horrifically bad.
Right.
And it's not like they're making it up with great 5-on-5 numbers. Their 5-on-5 numbers are adequate, right? And I was thinking maybe they're winning a lot of close games. It's like, well, a lot of games in overtime. Yeah. I mean, you look at some of the teams around them, and they're kind of comparable, right, with regulation losses and overtime losses. So they've been a curious team. Now, what Pointer said is right. They are a hardworking team. They play hard from beginning to end. They never give up on a game. We saw that on Saturday. But the numbers don't really lead to one concluding that they would be 3 points out of the final wild card spot.
When you always think of, at least when I do, the Islanders, you think of Brock Nelson. He's no longer there. He was part of a trade.
Yeah. He was there until the deadline.
To the deadline, I mean.
And he helped them for 2/3 of the season.
He did. But you just think, when you move a player like that, not that you're giving up the season. You're not, because they're still in contention. But you feel like a guy like that can help you more than that he can't. He's been a consistent 25-goal scorer. He's got one of the best shots in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of these teams that find themselves, partner, in a situation where they're competing for a playoff spot probably also need to retool their roster. You see moves like this at times, because you feel like Nelson is somebody who can help you.
Well, I think Lamoriello felt they couldn't get him re-signed.
And that was probably it.
Who knows what went into that, but...
So the Islanders are kind of dealing with that, moving on from a player who's been, in my estimation, one of the more underrated players in the league. I really like Brock Nelson. He does really well.
I think Colorado's really happy to have him. Now, they may not be able to keep him. Maybe they can. Who knows? But
he's a good
they're
player.
Happy to have him for this playoff run.
He's a really good player.
And he's a good playoff player, too.
Yeah, he is.
One reason why the Islanders won 2 rounds in the years that they lost to the Lightning in the 3rd round, Brock Nelson was a major contributor for them.
He was. And maybe one of the closest things to a superstar that they had for a while, Barzal, maybe was that guy. Nelson had a lot of great attributes. But the interesting thing about, the Islanders, but specifically the Lightning, you mentioned the road record. I do find that fascinating. If there's been one bugaboo for the Lightning, it's been the road record this year.
Yeah.
And maybe it doesn't always jive with when you take a look at their stats this year. Goals allowed, goals for, although you can break that down home and away, that some of these other playoff teams have been better on the road than the Lightning. And maybe that is something Victor Hedman hit the nail on the head. I don't know if he was speaking specifically to the fact, partner, that they have been struggling on the road this year.
Yeah.
Or is he just coming at it from a 30,000
They like
foot
to be
overview?
home, and they like to be home. Yeah.
Yes. But is there something bigger than that? And I'm wondering for you and for our audience, when you watch the Lightning, is there a trend that sticks out a little bit more on the road for this Lightning team that's causing them to have a record maybe that is not as good as some of these other playoff teams in the East? Because, you see a couple of games above 500, the Lightning are below.
I actually, and it's not hard to look this up, I just haven't done it. So maybe before the next show, especially after this game. Well, no matter what happens in this game tonight, I'll take a look at the Lightning stats broken up by home and road. Because you can do that. Because I talked about how impressive their overall metrics are. How much worse are those same metrics on the road as opposed to at home? Now, we know the Lightning have had like a lot of games where they've held the opposition to 2 or less at home. Fewer on the road. So I'm sure that they're allowing more goals on the road. And it would figure if you're a game under 500, you're having some games where you're allowing more than 2, right?
Sure.
So part of it is probably they just are not playing as well. I think the month of January skewed things a little bit. They really struggled on the road in January. Yeah. And that was kind of baked into that really brutal schedule. They went 0-3 in California, if you recall. They had another sequence later that month where I think they went 1-3. They had the 2 back-to-backs. We were just talking about that with Florida. 4-game trip, 2 sets of back-to-backs, and they only won 1 of those games, if I'm remembering right. I think the 3 losses were in regulation. Well, I just gave you 7 games. They went 1-6. All in that stretch, right? So that is going to skew your record. So if you like look at the rest of the road record, they are above 500. They've won more than they have lost, but of course that part of the schedule counts. Back-to-backs they've not done as well, probably as they would like. They're basically like around 500, maybe a game under. I should look and see what their finished record was in back-to-back games. I can actually look that up because most of them were on the road. So maybe the next time you're talking, I'll listen, but I will go to the screen and check the back-to-backs. There is a tab here, records and back-to-back games. So I didn't need to do that. Oh, Steve got me that information. Got us that information. All right. So the Lightning this year in back-to-backs overall. 9-12-1, 4-6-1 in game 1, 5-6 in game 2. And think back how many back-to-backs have been at home. They had the set right after Christmas, and they split. They beat the Rangers and lost to Montreal. And then they had one where they lost at Florida and came home and beat Columbus.
Yeah.
And I think that there was one more where they started at home, and then they went to Nashville, if I'm remembering right. I think they won both those games. So most of these have come on the road, and I just gave you the record. So they've not really done particularly well in back-to-backs where it's been road-road, but in the playoffs, you're not going to have that. If there is a back-to-back, both teams are in the same boat, and there's no travel. The back-to-back is going to happen in the same city. Usually it's games 3 and 4, and that's done for building availability / television. It's very rare. So you asked me the question, like, what do we make of it? They probably haven't played as well. I think they've been a victim of the schedule a little bit. And when they've had challenging kind of sequences on the road with back-to-backs, they haven't cashed in. I've been talking. If you want to read what Steve has.
No, you're good. I was just going to bring in Chris King.
Oh, okay.
there's some other
I
stuff.
went gabbing for a while.
No. Steve had some stats there we can get into, but
we'll talk about this on the other side.
Yeah. Chris, welcome. It's a power lunch.
Hey, Greg. Hey, Mishk. How are you guys doing?
Good.
We're talking
Well,
about.
we're glad that you got settled at home. I didn't know if you were going to be at the Islanders skate this morning and be able to get back in time, but clearly you did. You
We're
went to
here
the
and ready
skate.
to roll. Yeah.
So, Chris, I'm going to ask you this question because the last two games I've been looking at the Islanders stats and the overall stats. Like, let's take the 30,000-foot view. The Islanders' metrics this year, just from that 30,000-foot view, the general metrics, goals scored, goals allowed, power play, penalty kill, 5-on-5 ratio, you would expect the Islanders would not be in the mix for a playoff spot. I mean, they're like bottom half to bottom third. The special teams have struggled. So I mean this in a positive way. Like, what have the Islanders done well to kind of offset those numbers and put themselves in a position where they can get into a wild card spot?
I guess it's just hang around, Dave. Really, that's what it is. But you're right. I mean, especially the special teams at most points of the season, they were dead last in both power play and penalty kill, have inched out of the basement now to be second and third worst in those categories. And, especially of late, the goals against has been killing them. So, it's been a long season because of injuries. They had a tremendous amount of injuries. Every one of their top six defensemen has missed significant time with injuries. Obviously, Matt Barzal, their best overall player, has had two monster injuries that have limited to almost no time at all. And Semyon Varlamov, who they counted on to be a backup to give Ilya Sorokin a bit of a break, has played only 10 games all year. So somehow they've managed to hang around. Again, they're only 3 points out of a playoff spot, but, the problem now becomes the teams in between. There's three teams between them and the Montreal Canadiens in that playoff spot that they're chasing right now. But it is amazing when you look at, like you said, all the metrics say they shouldn't even be where they are, but yet here they are knocking on the door of a playoff spot. But, I picked the worst time of the year to go winless in 5 straight games for the first time all season.
Chris, you mentioned Barzal being banged up and limited time this year. And in today's NHL, you do need your best player to be healthy for a good portion of the year. That is a tough ask when he's out for as many games as he's been.
Yeah, he's only played 30 games all year, Greg. So, I mean, and it's 2 injuries. It's not just one injury. He had the one injury, went out, came back, had another one, is out, and is not expected back the rest of the regular season. And the plan going into the season was the Islanders signed Anthony Duclair to be the left wing on that top line with Bo Horvat and Matt Barzal. Well, Duclair gets hurt 5 games into the season. He misses nearly 30 games. Then when Duclair's ready to come back, Barzal gets hurt. He comes back. He gets hurt again. He goes out. So really kudos to Bo Horvat, who's, doing an incredible job in the middle because he really hasn't had the guys that, he had on opening night flanking him in Matt Barzal and Anthony Duclair.
The Islanders, their DNA is really that of a hardworking team. We saw that when the Lightning and Islanders played in the third round, we'll call it, for those back-to-back years. Yeah. The Islanders always seem to be a tough out in the playoffs. Do you feel that if this team can get in, that will still hold true, that regular season aside, and even if they don't have Barzal back or he is somewhat limited in that he is coming back, that they would pose problems for their first-round opponent, presumably Washington?
Yeah, it's tough to say, Mish, because me and you talk about those great playoffs, in 2020, 2021, the Isles and the Lightning, down to the final 4 teams the Islanders got. So basically the conference finals one year, the semifinal, as they called it, the other year. And obviously the Islanders battled Tampa tooth and nail, lost Game 7, 1-0 down in Tampa in those 21 playoffs. A goal away from going to the Stanley Cup final. But, you look at each of the last 2 years, they've made the playoffs and made a late charge. I mean, 2 years ago, they got in the final game of the regular season. Last year, they got in on the second to last game of the regular season. And I will bring this up, too, because nobody expected this to happen last year. They went 8-0-1 in April a year ago to get into the playoffs. So they led the NHL in wins with 8 in April. They led the NHL in points in April with 17 to get into the playoffs. But each of the last 2 years when they've gotten in, they've bowed out in the first round to Carolina once in 6 games. And then last year, it wasn't even that close, lost in 5, and their only win was in double overtime. So, with Washington looming, I think the only good news for the Islanders is it isn't Carolina and it isn't Tampa that they would have to play right away, because the last 6 times the Islanders have made the playoffs, 3 times they've gone out to the Bolts, 3 times they've gone out to the Canes. So that's their kryptonite, those 2 teams. So would it be a good thing that it's a different opponent in Washington? Maybe. But they might need another 8-0-1 in April just to get there. And again, last year at this time, nobody saw 8-0-1 coming in April. Nobody. They were 5 points out of a playoff spot. Now they're only 3, so you never know. And we thought last year, Mish, going 8-0-1, you couldn't have gone into the playoffs any hotter. but then still bowed out in 5 games to Carolina.
Mish and I often talk about that, Chris. Do you need to be playing well heading into the playoffs to have a deep run? It feels like, depending on the team, that isn't necessarily the case, that teams who are experienced can flip a switch. Do you have a sense that that's a little overrated heading into the postseason playing well, or do you think it's more important for a team who doesn't have a ton of postseason experience to feel good about themselves heading in?
Yeah, I used to believe in that too, Greg. But you look at the last 2 years, as I mentioned, they get in game 81, they get in game 82 with incredible pushes down the stretch, and you think, boy, they couldn't be in any better spot heading into the postseason, and it's been a first-round exit. So, I used to believe in that. Now I don't so much anymore, but you'd always like to think you want to be playing your best when the season comes to an end, the regular season, and push it right into the playoffs. But it hasn't been the case for them the last 2 years. So the thing is, they're not going to get there without that incredible push now in April with only 9 games to go. So you hope that they're able to get to that spot. But the last 2 years, it hasn't meant much. When you flip the calendar from regular season to playoffs, it just hasn't been their time of year as it was the previous 2 seasons when they made runs to the Final Four to meet up with Tampa both times.
One thing that Phil and I were commenting on and noting and praising about the Islanders, which can make them such a tough opponent, is the ability to throw out either Pajot or Horvat for a face-off, no matter which circle is that. Horvat was, I remember in Vancouver, he was usually among the league leaders in face-offs taken, because it's like Vancouver had him and nobody else. Now he comes to the Islanders and they can share the wealth a little bit. And we talked about the metrics. That is one where the Islanders are fantastic. Number 1 in the league for faceoffs as a team, and you have 2 of the top guys individually in the NHL. How much has that flexibility helped Patrick Waugh, no matter which zone it's in, which circle it's in? He can send out Pajot, he can send out Horvat to win an important faceoff.
Yeah, it's interesting. And they've both been basically top 5 in the league all year, Mishka. As you mentioned, the Islanders as a team have been number 1 all season long. The crazy thing about that is, we talked about the special teams, right? The power play and the penalty kill have essentially been worst in the league all year long. How can that be when the key to a power play or a penalty kill is winning that opening faceoff and either getting into your power play set or getting an early clear, right? You would think that would be a huge part of your success on the special teams, but yet somehow it hasn't translated into that. So that's the confounding part. When you have guys that are that good, and again, Horvat plays just power play, not penalty kill, but he's a lefty shot. Pajot plays both power play and penalty kill. He's a righty shot. So, Patrick Waugh can always take it on the strong side of his best faceoff guys. But it is crazy that just hasn't translated into more success on the special teams, when every coach will tell you that first faceoff to start a power play or penalty kill is huge, and it just hasn't worked out for them. But they know every night, that they're probably going to win the battle on the dot. It just hasn't translated on the special teams as much as they'd like to see.
Chris King joins us here on Power Lunch on Lightning Radio. Chris, we were talking about Brock Nelson before you came on board, and we haven't had a chance to maybe talk to you publicly here about that move and why it was made. I mean, I think we have an idea, but take us through that. Just such a dominant player for the Islanders and just a guy you want to build around, but it does come down to a contract, right? And did you think the return was decent enough, understanding the mechanisms there?
Yeah, it's a great question, Greg. And again, for those who didn't follow Brock Nelson, he had an amazing career. His final game as an Islander was his 901st game as a New York Islander, passing Bobby Nystrom for 4th most games in franchise history. And Bobby Nystrom is known as Mr. Islander. He finished at 900. And Brock was the guy, their leading goal scorer each of the last 3 seasons, just incredibly consistent over the years, an all-star, a center who, was a big part of their face-off success as well. So Lou Lamoriello had a tough decision to make because he would have been an unrestricted free agent come July 1st. Same with Kyle Palmieri. The interesting case was Lou felt that the negotiations with Kyle Palmieri were a little closer, so didn't trade him, and they still hope to get an extension worked out maybe even before the season ends. But he said, look, I made my best and final offer to Brock Nelson. He didn't accept it. And at that point, Lou is the ultimate businessman. He takes all those, feelings and sentimentality and what does he mean to the organization, the fan base. That doesn't matter for anything. It's a cut and dried, business decision. And Lou said that, to the media when he met with him after the trade deadline, said once Brock rejected that final offer, I had to get what I could get. And honestly, I and the Islander fans are thrilled with what he got, which is Cal Ritchie from Colorado, who, projects to be certainly a top 6 forward, if not a top 3 down the road for the Islanders, and a first-round draft pick. So I think, the bottom line was Lou knew he needed a first-round pick and a top prospect. And if you talk to anyone in the Avs organization, Cal Ritchie is probably their number one prospect. So he did a really good job in getting that return. And who knows, maybe Brock Nelson revisits the Islanders in the offseason when he's an unrestricted free agent, but he earned the right to look around this summer after an incredible 12 years in blue and orange. And again, it's interesting. He actually helped the Islanders quite a bit recently when Colorado was playing some of the teams the Islanders are chasing. And he had a couple of big games with a 2-goal game. He had a shootout winner in Montreal. So even though he's not wearing the blue and orange anymore, he's still helping out the Islanders' cause.
Why don't you handicap the remaining schedule the Islanders have? What do you got, 9 games left? And how does it look? I know you said 8-0-1 would be great down the stretch, but based on kind of home road and the types of opponents you're going to be seeing, what do you make of this home stretch?
It's tough, Mish. It's tough. And, I kind of backed it up to, even the weekend facing, obviously, Tampa twice, facing Carolina, which they lost. They actually have 5 home, 4 road in the final 9, which is the good news. The bad news is 2 of those home games are against Washington. And not only is that going to be a huge game for them point-wise, but obviously the Ovi watch that we're all on now, right? The Capitals play the Islanders in their 4th game of the month and their 8th game of the month. And Ovi's now 5 goals away, obviously, from breaking Wayne Gretzky's record. So that's going to come into play. They have the Minnesota Wild in there, who are certainly battling for a playoff spot. They have the Rangers in there at home, which is going to be a monster game for, the biggest rival they have. So there are no pushovers. There are no gimmies in there. They have Philadelphia in there, but suddenly they're undefeated under Brad Shaw, the former Islander coach. So even that you can't put in the win column. They have the Devils in there as well. Obviously, New Jersey's going to, lock up that 3 seed. Looks like they're locked into Carolina. So, yeah, no gimmies at all other than maybe Nashville. They're in Nashville, would be the only one you have to put in the W column. But the remainder of the schedule is not easy at all. And, again, the Washington games are going to be very interesting because, if Ovi is close and he's always had great success against the Islanders, the fact that he's got 2 cracks against them in the next 8 games for the Capitals, you just feel like he's either going to tie or break that record on Long Island. Both of those games are on Long Island. And just as an aside, I almost feel bad for the Caps fans because Washington has 9 games to go, but only 3 at home. So if their fans want to, see history, they may have to do a little traveling, although not that far in the month of April.
Chris, before we let you go, what do you make of just the Eastern Conference in general, the teams who are fighting for a playoff spot, the teams who are pretty locked in at this point? Do you feel like it's top heavy? Do you feel like it's anybody's game, particularly in that first round? What are you looking at?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, Greg. I certainly look at, obviously, the 2-3 matchup in the Metro will certainly be Carolina, New Jersey. There's no other way for it to go. I mean, Washington's not getting caught. Nobody's catching New Jersey from behind at this point. So that's kind of locked in. And then Washington obviously would face the weakest wild card team remaining. I think the real interesting race is in your division, in the Atlantic division, because, boy, nobody wants to be in that 2-3 matchup. It's going to be, again, another 100-point versus 100-point matchup, right? So it is so key for the Lightning to try to win that division. And obviously Florida and Toronto with a little bit of an edge right now, but you guys, I know, have a game in hand on them. So that's going to be fun to watch down the stretch. And just checking your schedule, I saw that you guys do host Toronto once, you do host Florida once. So those 2 home games, as long as you can be within striking distance for the Bolts, are going to be monster games there. So to me, the fun part is going to be watching how the Atlantic division plays out down the stretch. And then it looks like, that division winner would get Ottawa, which isn't an easy draw, but nobody wants to play the 2-3 in the Atlantic. And again, for Washington to get whoever comes out of this battle royale and finishes second in the wild card spot in the East, it could be a team that's, that's playing with a lot of spunk and playing hot to fight off everybody else. Right now, I kind of look at really 4 teams, kind of 5 teams battling for that final wild card spot in the East, and that'll be fun to watch as well. So it's going to be a great, it's 2.5 weeks, right? 2.5 weeks. 2 weeks from Thursday, the regular season comes to an end. I can't believe we're into April already, but this is the best time of year. Other than the Stanley Cup playoffs.
That's right. I before we let you go, do you like the old format 1-8, 2-7, or do you like that 2-3 right out of the gate?
No, I want to go back to 1-8, 2-7, just because of the 2-3 situation. There's no way 2 100-point teams should be facing off in that opening round. It just shouldn't happen that way. And again, whoever wins the Atlantic, kudos to them because they avoid that battle. But it's just not fair that 2 100-point plus teams are going to play in the opening round in the Atlantic. But that will happen.
It will.
Could happen in the Central, too.
Yeah, it could happen. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Chris, we appreciate you, bud, and we'll do it again soon, but thank you for coming on.
All right, thanks, Greg. Thanks, Mish. Have a great call.
Thanks, Kinger. See you tonight.
All right. Chris King joining us right there. Yeah, that's been something you hear whispered around a little bit more. Maybe it's more from fans. I get on X, but just
I think
go back to
pundits
the
feel
old.
that way, and maybe
Yeah.
some players too. But the most important vote is in the other direction. That's Gary Bettman's vote. He likes the.
Do you think
format
it
the way
accomplished?
is.
But do you think it accomplished what it accomplished?
Rivalries? Well, I mean, it's not truly like within the division only because the wild card can flip from one division to the next. I mean, if it plays out the way it looks like it's going to play out, unless Detroit sneaks in there as wild card
Right.
2, you're going to have 4 teams in the Atlantic in one bracket and 4 teams from the Metropolitan in the other bracket. But it isn't always straight division because of the wild card,
Sure.
which we've seen.
The
I don't
issue
know.
I have.
I mean, I kind of. So for a fan base, for a team that has gotten to 100 points, it's pretty disappointing to lose in the first round. And when you're losing to another 100-point team, you're kind of like, I wish this ride would have lasted longer. From the perspective of you have to win 4 series and you have to beat good teams to win the Stanley Cup, I mean, you're going to face tough competition. And, you know, maybe you're facing that 100-point opponent in the second round. Like, if you beat the 100-point opponent in the first round, you might see a less high team in the second round, right? Like, if there was an upset in the first round.
There's not enough
So,
incentive.
There's no
not-
easy path, is what I'm saying.
Well, but that's my point. There's if you're going to have this much parity in today's game, you need to give a team who has a good regular season an edge.
Yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, a team who finishes 2 or 3, and let's just take the Lightning and Panthers for this example. What's the incentive there in the regular season to just, you know, battle and have the great record that you're going to have? Like, it's
Well, get in
okay
the
to sit there and
playoffs.
say, yeah, but it's okay to sit there and say
point.
2-7. That's
Yeah.
your reward. Okay, you know, look, it's okay to come out and say the 7th seed is the lower seed, and you know, we know each game.
We already have 1-8-2-7 though. I mean, unless the division winner in the other division has
Right.
fewer points than the second place team in the stronger division.
Correct.
We already have.
Correct.
I mean, unless the wild card is whacked up, like the third place team has fewer points than one of the wild card teams. Most of the time, we
That's
have
fair.
1-8-2-7. It's the other 2 matchups.
That's the part that maybe needs.
And
to be
basically, what you're
tinkered.
saying. Let me look at the standings right now in the East. Anyway, if we had it stopped today, the Lightning would actually be. They would be the 4th seed. It would be exactly the same, Greg.
Yeah, because they would
right
be
now
taking on the
Carolina would play New Jersey in the
Right.
3-6, and the Lightning would play the Panthers in the 4-5. Now, maybe by the time we get to the end of the season,
it changes a little
things
bit.
will look a little different. And then in that Central Division, you know, Dallas has won 6 in a row. Really had that loss against the Lightning. Pete DeBoer was not happy.
Yeah.
I don't know if they've won 6 in a row since then or what, but they've pulled to within 4 points of Winnipeg. So they're within striking distance. With both teams have 8 games left, and Colorado's 8 points back. So, well, Steve is saying it would be.
Matchups would be Washington, Montreal, Carolina, Ottawa, Toronto, New Jersey, Tampa.
Yeah, so that's because Toronto and Carolina are tied in points, so he's going off of the tiebreaker. So yes, in this instance, it's true. Carolina technically is the 2nd seed. Although I bet, Greg, the way they would do it, they wouldn't just do 1-8-2-7. Because we have divisions, they would still keep the division winners as one of the top 2 seeds. Because that's how they did it.
And
when
then
we
they
had
did
3
they do
divisions.
that in football too, I think, too, right? Like if you win your division, even if
Yeah.
you have a lesser record and you win
Yeah,
it,
like that 4th place team. The Bucks
Right.
have sometimes been a
Yeah.
4th place
For
division winner facing a team that actually has a worse record, or
Yeah.
they have a worse record than their opponent, but they get the home field. Anyway, it's food for thought. I actually don't waste a lot of energy. I shouldn't say waste. I don't spend a lot of energy thinking about the format. I know it's kind of the topic du jour because we may
It
have
comes
a
up
couple
now.
of divisions
Yeah.
where it looks like it's going to be a hard first-round exit for a team that's had a very successful regular season. I do want to go back to what we were talking about,
Yeah.
both with the home road difference and the back-to-back. So my memory was a little wonky. The Lightning have had 4 back-to-backs of their back-to-backs that were not road. So one was home. They split. That was right after Christmas. They beat the Rangers, and then they lost to Montreal. They've had 1 back-to-back where they played at home in the first game and then went on the road in the second game. That was right before Christmas. Both games were against Florida. They lost at home and they won on the road. So that was a split. The other 2, they played the first game they played the second game at home, the first game on the road. So in late November, they beat Nashville in overtime in Nashville, came home and lost to Toronto. They didn't have Kucherov in that second game. And then the other one, they lost at Florida and then came home and beat Columbus. That was in early March. So they've split. In the 4 back-to-backs that were not road, they split, which means that they have not done particularly well in the others. So again, in case you're just joining us, we're looking at the Lightning's back-to-back record. So overall, 9-12-1 overall. So they've had 11 back-to-backs. So of the 7 that were road, their record was 5-8-1. Not great. That's overall. That's factoring in both games. But that's going to go away in the playoffs. The Lightning are a team, they just don't have a lot of back-to-backs involving home games. Most of their back-to-backs are road.
Right.
And Steve had sent us previously kind of the home-road breakdown. So the Lightning at home are first in goals for and third in goals allowed. So excellent. As in, the higher the number, the lower the goals allowed.
Yeah.
Right? So ranking third means third best defensively. Yep. Road games, they're 5th in offense, 20th in defense.
There you go.
Pretty significant difference. They're not scoring as
gap.
much, too.
No.
So 3.84 at home, 3.33 in the road, but still over 3. They're scoring over 3 goals per game on average on the road.
Should be enough, right?
It's that defense. 2.14 at home, goals allowed per game, 3.17 on the road. So
I wonder how much of that damage was done in January, to your point.
Yeah, well, they lost those 3 games in California where they were like 2-1, 2-1, and then 4-1, right, with a couple of late goals and an empty netter.
Yeah.
They've also, like, when you're losing games this year, I feel like when you lose games, you're giving up empty net goals. Like, coaches have been very aggressive with the goalie pull, and teams have scored a lot of empty net goals this year. They have. So when your record is not as good, that goals against is going to get inflated a little bit because you're probably maybe giving up an empty net goal, and sometimes 2. That's happened to the Lightning in some games where they were down, they pulled the goalie, gave him an empty netter, they kept the goalie pulled, and gave him another empty netter. So the final score was more lopsided, but it's happened for them too, where the other team has pulled the goalie, and they've maybe scored 1 or 2 empty netters. Opening night in Carolina, that was a 2-1 game. The Lightning scored 2 empty netters and won 4-1.
Incredible.
But looking at those numbers, our diagnosis would be the Lightning are just allowing too many goals on the road. They're going to need to be better in terms of keeping the puck out of their net on the road in the playoffs.
That's fair. Speaking of playoffs, single-game tickets for potential first-round playoff games go on sale to the general public this Friday, April 4th at 10 a.m. Fans may purchase tickets online at Ticketmaster.com. Our Bold for Life members and Lightning Insider newsletter subscribers will have access to an earlier pre-sale. You can subscribe at TampaBayLightning.com/insider. Tampa Bay's 2025 postseason is presented by Advent Health. And again, those are for playoff home games going on sale. I wanted to get to this question we got via email, actually on YouTube, that was passed via email to us, and then get to some other questions as well. Partner Doc says, maybe because this was the most recent, but that was JJ's best game this year. He was playing insane, stopping great chances, especially the shots of the rebounds. Am I wrong to think, though, that when one goes in, it takes him a while to get his mind confidence back up? He let in 2 quick ones after that first goal.
I'm not sure if that's necessarily the case. I'd have to go back and look at his other starts and see if the goals have come in bunches against. I mean, got to be honest. So Pollock has one of the hardest shots in the league, and he was screened on that.
That's
so
a tough one.
Earlier, when the Islanders weren't scoring, Johansson was making the save, but they were also missing the net on some opportunities. That one didn't miss the net, and it was a bullet. I mean,
It was.
Pollock can drill it. It was from distance, but he found the spot. I don't know much about this Mark Gatcombe, who's a college player who played at UConn. UConn's hockey program is really, like when I was in school, UConn didn't even have a Division I hockey team. Same with Penn State.
Sure.
Those two teams played each other in the second round. Penn State won in overtime, so Penn State's going to the Frozen Four. But UConn's got a good hockey program now, and Gatcombe played at UConn. He can shoot. Like, he picked the corner on that shot. It was a pretty good shot. I give that more credit to the shooter. And the D'Angelo goal, that was a save on a shot from the point that was screened, and the puck came on the rebound right to D'Angelo. Like, D'Angelo made a pretty good read right there. I'm not sure that really any of those goals would be considered soft goals by Johansson. It was more that the Islanders were applying pressure, and the dam didn't completely break because they didn't get the game tied, but they found the net on 3 of their looks. They just happened to come in basically a 3-minute span. But as I mentioned on the show yesterday, after that, the number of opportunities were far fewer for the Islanders up until the very end of the game.
I don't notice any trends, with JoJo in net. If he gives up one, is he leaking a couple other after that? I think overall he's been very solid.
Yeah.
That might not be the analysis he wants, Doc wants, but there's not a trend where I'm saying, boy, it seems like they're really picking on his glove side, or boy, he's really deep in his crease. I don't pick up on that. I can check with Chief on that though.
Yeah.
Our in-house guru. Anthony says, I'd be more upset about the third goal than Cooch shenanigans in the end. After TV timeout, not able to shift momentum. First goal was just a blast, to your point, partner. On the second, JoJo made the mistake himself, and 59 lost his stick.
Yeah.
Score definitely.
He's talking about the rim. So
how the game
Johansson rimmed it around the boards, and Gensel dropped his stick, so it came right to Gatcombe. But Gatcombe is not in a scoring position. I credit him. I mean, I have to see a replay of the shot. I thought it was far side under the bar. Pretty good shot.
Yeah.
Maybe, if you're going to quibble, you're going to like Johansson needs to play his angle a little bit better there. Fair enough. I mean, I'm going to defer to the goalie experts on that one.
Which would be everybody on X.
Yeah. So Anthony didn't like the third goal, I think, is what he's saying. Okay. Well, that was annoying from the Lightning standpoint because they were literally a foot from clearing the zone and couldn't, which was a little bit of a problem, maybe more than a little bit of a problem. It was a problem during that game. Clearing the zone was a problem during the game, but some of that can be laid at the feet of which team was competing harder.
Yeah.
That was part of what was baked into that game. The Islanders were playing a more desperate game, so they were very, very hungry to try and hold pucks in, and it played out that way. And on that one, they held it in. It was not like the Johansson rim, where it was a little bit of a miscue. He rimmed it. Gensel dropped a stick. It came right to the Islander guy. This was more of a battle right at the blue line, and the Lightning could not execute the clear. But I kind of chalked that up to which team was playing a little hungry, and the Islanders had a little wind at their back then, too, because they had scored the 2 quick goals. But they held it in, worked it around, and then Siplikov takes a shot from the point that's, a screen shot, and D'Angelo goes right to the right spot to get the rebound, and he has the angle to put it in.
Anthony also says that 0-3 record against the Leafs could cost us first place. Exciting finish incoming. Cooch needs 2 power play goals the rest of the way to get to the century mark.
In his career, obviously.
Yeah. Be a hell of a...
Steve just sent us, Kucherov can become the 10th player in NHL history to register 3 straight 4-point games. Yzerman was the last guy to do it in 92-93. Well, we'll see. I don't know if the Lightning historically, I'd have to go back and look at their record. Like, they've had some wins in this new building, the one at Belmont Park, UBS Arena, where the Islanders have played for the last several years. They've had some ugly losses here, though, too, if memory serves. And look, if the Lightning get another 4-point game from Kucherov, that would be fantastic.
He could do it. It's funny how since 1992, so you're talking about players like Lemieux, Gretzky.
Yeah, and that was when that was before things really tightened up.
Yeah, for sure. So
in
that
terms
kind
of
gives you
the dead puck era was not quite. It was not 92-93. That was the year that like Solani scored all those goals, McGinley scored all those goals for Buffalo.
I think it's an interesting question. That dead puck era.
Mm-hmm.
What years would you put that in? 95 when the Panthers came in?
So we had the lockout in 94-95 where we missed half the season. But look at part of it was the Florida Panthers. And they were an expansion team.
Yeah.
And they devised a system that helped them like offset the lack of talent.
That forced Mario to retire.
Roger Nielsen.
First.
Roger Nielsen was there. He was big into video. Like what is defense? Like defense is strong positional play in addition to effort, which is something you've talked about. But video really became a coaching tool in the 90s, and it coincided with teams getting much better defensively, where they're able to kind of X and O their way into disrupting. That's what it was. It was disrupting. It was trying to slow down the high-scoring teams and put them in quicksand, which made it very frustrating for the high-scoring teams. So that was part of it, that video became part of kind of the coaching repertoire. And I think that helped teams get better defensively. Also, it's a copycat league. So when you see a team like the Panthers, who got to the Stanley Cup final in their third year, kind of, by then Doug McClain was the coach. But you know what I mean? Like, it didn't take long for them to kind of start playing with the big boys, which was very unusual. So they had that in their kind of arsenal of defending. But the other part was the Devils. So the Devils had been a team, and they got Brodeur. Brodeur arrived prior to that. Like he was their goalie in the early 90s, and of course he was famously in net for that 94 series against the Rangers. But as the Devils became champions, they perfected kind of that trap. And so again, copycat league, right? I think it was those two things. So for sure by 95, although the Penguins, as you remember, Greg, were a great offensive team in 95-96. So they kind of carried the baton for the high-scoring teams into the mid-90s, but by the late 90s, I mean, we were seeing 2-1 games pretty regularly. Like, it was very, very rare in the playoffs to see anything more than 2-1 or 3-2.
This is more of just cooler talk, but, the players who basically came around that time, that decade window, if you want to say from like post-lockout to
mid-90s to mid-2000s.
Yeah.
And then we had the other work stoppage where they changed the rules.
But like that period of time, do we need to look at players who were considered the best during that era and give them a little bit more of a pass and say, you were doing it at a time when there was a ton of stuff going on that, quite frankly, wouldn't be allowed.
And how much were the goalies' numbers that were extremely low, skewed in that direction too?
I mean, Garth Snow was posting big wins,
So look, no one is going to say that Grant Fuhr wasn't a great goalie in his era, and one of the best goalies to play, and certainly has all the hardware, right, and won cups. But his numbers, the Oilers in the 80s were winning games like 8-4, right? So he didn't need to keep the other team to 1. He just needed to prevent the other guy from allowing less. Like, he needed to be one better than the other guy.
Tom Barrasso was the same way.
Yeah.
Tom Barrasso got in the Hall of Fame. You look at his numbers. I mean, he was very talented, but Penguins would score 5 and he'd give up 4. And,
right.
There were times where he was better because the team had Kevin Constantine, if you remember that name, came into the league and really got into the film study there. Tampa Bay sports fan says, any updates on Isaac Howard? Interesting, we haven't heard anything. Lightning can't risk him playing his senior year and becoming a UFA. I mean, we've kind of
we don't have any information on it. I mean, we relayed what Ed reported in an article on the show yesterday. I think the article may have come out on Sunday, but
Jared, can you?
I don't know if Julian? I don't know if Ed got this from a source, and we should maybe have Ed on. Maybe we'll try and get Ed on so he can talk about where he got this information. But the information that he has is accurate. The Lightning do not have enough cap room right now to add Isaac Howard as is. Now, fans might say, well, why don't they send down Cam Atkinson, which they did when they had to call up Halverson? Yes, they could do that. Why haven't they? I don't know. That's way beyond my pay grade. But we have not heard any news about a prospective signing of Howard. But the fans who are concerned, rest assured, the Lightning are very much aware of the scenario. And they are the ones that are talking to Howard and his agent. So
Are they talking to him now? Of course they are.
I presume they're talking.
You've got to. You know, we've talked about this. Andrew says, having covered Lucas Mercury for years at UMass, I can tell you that he is a big, strong, physical player who likes scoring from right in front of the net and throws big hits. And a guy whose skills could or should translate well to the pros. Fans will like him.
So I did read the story, and I don't know if it's Mercury or Mercury. I just don't know the player at all yet, but it could be either. He was drafted by Carolina. He told Carolina he was not signing with them. So here we have again a player. I mean, it happened with Randon, right? But Randon was there and decided he didn't want to be there. We kind of had this with Adam Fox when he was drafted by Carolina. So Carolina has to overcome a little bit of the reputation in some instances. But the college player can hold the threat of running out the clock.
You don't like this rule, though, right?
I don't.
I remember you
like
mentioned
it.
this on a show. Yeah, I mentioned.
And look, you made the point that there are very few times in the career of a professional athlete where that athlete can kind of
Control
not write his ticket,
destiny.
at least control some of it.
Yeah.
And I'm on board with that. Look, I get it. I do not think that we should go back to the 60s when there was no free agency. I mean, but the players that have hit UFA status have served, it sounds like they're serving a prison sentence, but like they've served their time, right? Like they've put in the years of service to earn that right. A player who chooses to go to college should have the option to go to college. But by going to college, it is putting the team that drafted that player into a little bit of a tough spot. And you would like the team to encourage the player. Like if the player says, I want to go play for University of Minnesota. I'm from Minnesota. I want to get my education. I want to get my degree, or at least take steps toward getting my degree. So if I leave after 3 years, I can finish like McDonough did later. And, you know, you want the franchise to be on board with that. But it is giving outsized influence to the player and power to the player who has not played a game in the pro game. And I don't know. So the part of it that rubs me the wrong way is it's not like the team drafts the player and then they're like, all right, we'll see you in 3 years when we're ready to sign you. Like they are investing in the player. They're bringing them to the development camp over the summer. You know, they have their director of player development visiting the player, like they're in communication. Here's how we want you to work out during the off season. They are working on developing that player before that player signs, presumably, a contract. And the player's just like, see ya.
Yeah.
That part rubs me the wrong way. But I'm sure there are a lot of people who feel differently about it.
What's the I guess
it's 4 years. So, you know, for the player who's drafted and goes straight to college, and not all of them do, they have to choose to stay all 4 years.
What are the rules?
Before that point comes?
Is it the same amount of time, partner, if you draft a kid who elects to just stay over in Europe and plays over there?
The European rule, that's a good question.
Different?
I'm not sure how long that one might even be shorter. But
is it shorter?
But here's the thing. Like a player who stays in Europe is kind of playing in a pro league usually anyway. College is a different category, right?
Yeah.
So like the players that are going to junior, I believe the team holds the players' rights for only 3 years. It's 4 if they go to college. So they're giving them the extra year. But no player who goes to junior hockey is going to just like run out the clock. Usually they're drafted at 18 and they finish their junior career by the time they're 20. So you're still in that window. And also you can sign the player.
Right.
You can get the player locked up before that player turns pro. You could draft a player and sign him the next day. But that player can go back and you know, play a couple more years in junior.
I
if he
find that
wants.
sometimes very confusing.
NCAA
The amateur
rules, you
route,
can't
yeah.
sign a contract.
Right.
You lose your amateur eligibility. Which, look, that's fine too. But I don't know. It's the part about the time and energy and
development.
resources and investment in a player you've
I get that.
drafted just to see that player then say, I think I'm going to shop the market and see what else is out there.
That's
So
fair.
anyway, with Mercury, what he said to Carolina was, I'm not signing
Bye-bye.
with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they traded him to the Lightning for a 6th-round pick.
Nick,
His
on
numbers
YouTube-
are impressive, though, in college.
Yeah,
For
we
sure.
got a scouting report there. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Nick says on YouTube, who do you think will get the final wild card spot in the East?
Oh, my gosh. Take your pick. Can one of these teams go on a run? I mean, like Chris was talking about, Chris King, who joined us near the beginning of the show, was like, the Islanders may need another 8-0-1 run. Maybe not. If the 5 teams that are in contention for one spot continue like stumbling and bumbling along. We talked about their record in the last 10. All of them have not been good in the last 10. So whatever they have left, 7, 8 games, 9 games maybe just being above 500 might be enough if the other 4 teams continue to be average. You go 6-3 in the last 9, 5-3-1. Maybe that's enough, but it's hard to say. Usually when push comes to shove, like as we get closer and the teams are still in contention, they do go on. It's rare to see a team like lose their last 5 in regulation when, they have a chance to get into the playoffs.
Typically, and this isn't always the case, you look at the team who has the most talent. Because if you have the most talent, sometimes that usually plays out during an 82-game season. At least it should.
Who does have the most talent?
I think the Rangers, for me, just skill-wise, have the most talent.
Yeah.
But
Columbus
they've
may
been so
have the most
inconsistent.
talent in terms of offensive firepower. They've been very impressive
Maybe.
offensively
I mean,
this year.
look, I throw
But
you out
they've
Panarin.
struggled defensively.
Right. But if I gave you a lineup of Trocheck, Zibanejad, Panarin,
Miller,
Lafreniere, I mean, there's some good players there. That Zibanejad's a -18. I mean, that should speak to where he is this year. And I think, to me, that would be the team if you're asking, because I think they have an opportunity to eventually, partner to your point, maybe go 7-3 with 10 games remaining to close things out, because I think they've been there, done that. I'm not going to tell you that's a sure thing, because obviously it hasn't been. But I mean, that's who I would look at as my dark horse to get that final spot. All the other teams, I feel like, are even more flawed than the Rangers. I mean, I have no confidence in the Wings. I don't.
Yeah.
The Islanders,
And I had mentioned they play 5 of their last 6 on the road.
Yeah.
And they're seeing a lot of teams in the Atlantic. I mean, they're playing the Lightning in Tampa. They're playing the Panthers in Sunrise. They're playing the Leafs in Toronto. If they get in, they will have earned it. That's what I'll say about the Leafs.
That is true. All right, so we've got the game tonight. That's a 7:30 start.
Yeah, ESPN Plus.
Are you on with Brian Engblom?
Brian is with me tonight. Yes.
You're going to be on with Engblom, which will be great. We'll
because
be on
the TV
air.
guys are on the trip from the beginning, but they're not
off
working tonight. Yeah,
we're making Brian work. 7 o'clock.
Brian
We'll be on
working.
we'll have the pregame, and then tomorrow you and I will be back at it, recapping.
Lightning will be in Ottawa tomorrow.
Yep. Efforting to have Scott Laughlin on
day.
Thursday.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So if we can get him from Sirius
Good to talk with Scott.
Yeah, always knowledgeable, and we'll kind of go from there. But should be a good one. And we thank Chris for hopping on. Great job getting him on, partner. We appreciate that. And then I will talk to you as we get a little closer to the puck dropping tonight.
Yeah, have a good afternoon. Talk to you tonight.
Great job as always. Thanks to Steve Ersnick, again, Chris King, and for you listening to our program. I am Greg Linnelli. You've been listening to Power Lunch on Lightning Radio.